Why is Trump targeting Harvard after Columbia? How foreign students will be affected? Explain. Joint Task Force to Combat Anti-Semitism will review $256 million in contracts between the U.S. government and Harvard. It is also reviewing $8.7 billion in multi-year grant commitments to Harvard and its affiliates. The Trump administration has threatened Harvard University and Princeton with federal funding cuts as part of the crackdown on anti-Semitism protesters on campuses. The government had earlier held negotiations with Columbia University to continue $400 million of funding to the Ivy League school after it agreed to a series of demands from the administration. The move has triggered concern over visa scrutiny and research opportunities for international students, particularly those from India. Immigration arrests and funding freezes are already affecting student life and academic roles. NANN and the Department of Education, Department of Health and Human Services, and the General Services Administration released a statement on Monday saying they will review federal contracts and grants at Harvard University. The statement further said the Joint Task Force to Combat Anti-Semitism will review $256 million in contracts between the federal government and Harvard and its affiliates. It is also reviewing more than $8.7 billion in multi-year grant commitments to Harvard and its affiliates. The task force was formed as a response to Trump's January 29 executive order called Additional Measures to Combat Anti-Semitism, the Department of Justice announced on February 3. While Harvard's recent actions to curb institutionalized anti-Semitism, though long overdue, are welcome, there is much more that the university must do to retain the privilege of receiving federal taxpayers' hard-earned dollars, Josh Grunbaum, a senior official at the General Services Administration, said in a statement, as reported by the New York Times. While the report quoted Harvard's President Alan Garber as saying, "We are not perfect, and Harvard would work with the federal government to ensure that they have a full account of the work we have done and the actions we will take going forward to combat anti-Semitism." Trump's executive order is officially aimed at targeting anti-Semitism, which saw an uptick in the U.S. and around the world after October 7, 2023, when Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups attacked Israel and led to the deaths of more than 1,100 people. More than 50,000 people have been killed in the enclave. The executive order has also laid the ground for the Trump government to deport those international students who participated in pro-Palestinian protests. NANN and pro-Palestinian students set up camps on the campus site called Harvard Yard on April 24, 2024 in solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza. Harvard's encampment, called Harvard Out of Occupied Palestine Hoop, was among several such encampments that were set up at several U.S. universities. They demanded that their universities divest from weapons companies and companies associated with Israel, among other things. In May 6, Harvard President Garber said in a statement that Hoop had disrupted the institute's educational activities. The right to free speech, including protest and dissent, is vital to the work of the research university. But it is not unlimited, Garber said. On May 14, the university and student protesters announced that they had reached an agreement to end the encampment. However, there were two differing statements, with the students saying Harvard had agreed to their demands and the university saying it had only opened itself to dialogue. In January 2024, much before the encampment happened, Garber set up two presidential task forces on campus, one dedicated to combat anti-Semitism and the other to combat bias against Muslims and Arabs. On March 29, 82 of Harvard Law School's 118 active professors signed a letter addressed to the student body, accusing the government of retribution against law firms and lawyers representing clients and causes that the Trump administration opposes, as per Al Jazeera. NANN after first encampment came up in Columbia on April 17, 2024, protesters at the university occupied Hamilton Hall, after which the university called the New York police to crack down on its student protesters. In February this year, the Trump administration revoked $400 million in federal funding to Columbia, citing a failure to protect Jewish students from anti-Semitic harassment. On March 8, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement ICE agents arrested Mahmoud Khalil, 29, a Columbia graduate who led the negotiations with the university during last year's campus protests. The U.S. government now seeks to deport Khalil, who held a green card when he was arrested and is currently detained in an ICE processing facility in Louisiana. On March 5, the U.S. State Department revoked the visa of Ranjani Srinivasan, an urban planning PhD candidate at Columbia University. 4 days later, Columbia unenrolled her. Srinivasan flew to Canada on March 11 before she could be deported. Columbia said it has deputed 36 security officers with special powers to arrest students when appropriate. On March 13, the Joint Task Force to Combat Anti-Semitism issued a letter to Columbia, stating 9 preconditions in order to restore the funding. On March 18, the university listed new rules in a memo sent to the Trump administration, accepting the government's demands. NANN and Harvard President Garber said in a statement, "If this funding is stopped, it will halt life-saving research and imperil important scientific research and innovation." As per the New York Times report, it was not clear how the government had arrived at the figure of nearly $9 billion in grants for Harvard and its affiliates. But Garber indicated that it included money for hospitals affiliated with Harvard's medical school, like Mass General Brigham, the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute and Boston Children's Hospital. Lawrence H. Summers, the former Treasury Secretary and former Harvard president, said anti-Semitism had been a grave problem on the campus for a long time. Just because Donald Trump says something doesn't make it wrong, and Harvard has been way too slow in responding to the anti-Semitism, he told the New York Times. Scott Cooper, senior counsel at Fragomen, a US-based immigration law firm, told Business Standard that the bigger issue lies in how the absence of the Education Department would affect the flow of federal grant money. Nan and the Trump administration suspended $175 million in funding to the University of Pennsylvania, citing its transgender sports policies. A letter sent by the Department of Education to 60 institutions including Harvard warned of possible enforcement actions under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. It referred to anti-Semitic eruptions on elite campuses that have disrupted student life over the past year. Princeton University said several federal agencies have frozen dozens of research grants. President Chris S. Gruber told Bloomberg News that the university is still seeking clarity on the rationale for the suspension. Princeton, which had a $33.4 billion endowment in 2024, received $455.8 million in government grants and contracts. The university said it has received suspension notices from agencies including the Department of Energy, NASA, and the Department of Defense. In the 202,324 academic year, there were over 331,000 Indian students in the U.S. According to the Open Doors report, 42.9 chose maths or computer science, and 24.5 were in engineering. With reduced federal funding to top U.S. universities, opportunities for foreign students will shrink. This will also impact American companies and industries, which rely on skilled workers in tech, healthcare, and other research-driven fields. Another problem is the rise in scrutiny of visa applications. Higher denial rates have already discouraged students from applying to U.S. universities. As a result, there is shift towards Canada, Australia, and the UK for higher education. Nan